Reflections from Torch Trust, focusing on Christian faith and sight loss.
Hello and a warm welcome to Reflections, the show from Torch Trust that focuses on faith and disability in today's world. I'm your host, Marilyn Baker, and I'm delighted to have you with us this morning. Today, we're going to talk about some of the myths surrounding blind people, what some people believe and are not true. We're taking a bit of a light-hearted look, so to help me explore this subject, I'm going to be talking to two blind friends, Jan Turner and our special guest in the studio today, Sheila Armstrong. Well, lovely to have you with us, Sheila.
Thank you.
Now, I believe you've actually got a list of 12 myths of blindness. Where on earth did you get that from?
Well, I have, and I got it from a good place called the internet.
Wonderful. Well, looking forward to hearing some of these myths.
Right.
One myth that I don't think is on the list, I've heard this one. Blind people are always musical. Now, actually, that's not true at all.
Oh, yes, I think we can testify to that. We can think of a few, can't we?
We can actually. I mean, I used to teach in a blind school and, you know, unless a blind person has a good musical memory, it's very difficult for them to play music at times because, of course, they can't sight read. You can only read Braille music if you've done that, of course, if you've learnt Braille music, but you can't read and play at the same time. Pretty impossible, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. I did struggle with Braille music up to about grade 4, but I threw in the towel after that.
Yes, well, it's very, very complicated system,
It
so
is, yes.
we have to dispel that one. Now, let's hear some of the other myths you've got there then, Sheila.
Well, here's a good one. Blind people have improved hearing and touch.
Well, now, I certainly don't think that's true. I do think, though, that people use their senses a bit more. Like, for instance, if a sighted person goes into a shop, they can just look at the shelves, what the shop is. But if I go into a butcher's or a chemist, I use my nose to tell.
That's true. That's quite true.
So do you think it's more about developing, not that they're more highly developed, but just that we use those particular senses more, do you think?
I think so. I think some people like to comfort themselves with the idea that blind people have a sixth sense that nobody else has got, but of course we know that isn't really true.
No, it isn't. And they do. It is like comforting themselves when they come out with something like that, isn't it?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, that's right. Well, let's hear from Jan about an experience she had when she felt completely overlooked when she arrived at her holiday destination.
I'll tell you a funny thing that happened when I went on holiday with a friend. I booked into a guest house and for a start I'd had the route in Braille and so I directed my family and friend all the way there to the house. And when I got to the house, the person, for some considerable time after I got there, assumed that they had to go through my friend to ask me if I wanted a cup of tea or things like that. And they assumed I hadn't got any idea of living at all. And they assumed that the children belonged to my friend and that they didn't belong to me. So that's quite funny, really, because that's a perception of that blind people don't have children or be married or anything like that, which I think is one perception that people have.
Interesting, really, because the other day a well-known pastor said to me, "How does it feel, Marilyn, not being able to have children, being blind?" And I quickly pointed out to him that just wasn't true, that I knew some very, very good blind parents, very able blind parents.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'm not one of them, so here's another myth. Blind people cannot live on their own.
Oh, that is a real... Now, of course, if you're an older blind person, I think there's a great deal of difference between someone who is younger and we've been blind all our lives and then someone who is older and they suddenly lose their sight.
Absolutely, yes. Because
They're
we're very used to doing things, aren't we? Like making cups of tea, things that could be quite dangerous for someone who's not used to handling a kettle without looking at it.
Absolutely. Those things are almost like second nature to those that have been blind for a long time, aren't they?
Yes. Here's another rather contrasting one to that one. Blind people live difficult and dangerous lives.
That depends, doesn't it, on what they're doing?
Yes. But actually, the safety record for blind people is quite good, although I do have a friend who managed to set her flat on fire, her kitchen anyway, by leaving a loaf of bread and switching on the cooker.
Oh,
so,
my goodness.
She did contribute to that little statistic, I suppose.
Yes, I should think she did. Now, one of the myths that actually Jan raised, really, was that blind people can't answer for themselves. This is really pretty terrible.
Yes, I think we've all had experienced that one. And we can be, having done something quite complicated, as Jan described, she'd actually brailled out the route and directed her family to the holiday destination. And then she finds that, people are asking for things on her behalf.
Yes, I think this has got a lot to do with a person's sense of dignity, who they are. They feel crushed, humiliated in a way, don't they? It's like, they're just someone to be not even taken any notice of.
Yes, I think so. And also they couldn't believe that the children really belonged to her. That was another thing, wasn't it?
Quite a hurtful thing.
Yes, I think it could be very hurtful.
Yes, that's right.
Now it's time for our thought for the week. It was written by Jill Ferraby, a former Torch employee and volunteer.
In our walk with God, we all encounter trials and difficulties, and at these times often the natural reaction is to think that God has left us, He's not in control and He's not answering our prayers. However, He helps us little by little to develop the trust that enables us to recognize that in fact the exact opposite is the case. He is with us in an extra special way during these times and is very much in control of what is going on. And it's all for a purpose, even though we may never know in this life what that purpose is. I once heard this lovely little story based on a verse from the Bible in Malachi chapter 3, verse 3.
Like a refiner of silver, he will sit and closely watch as the dross is burned away.
A woman who read this verse at a Bible study wanted to know how it related to us and our walk with God. So she decided to investigate further. She called and made an appointment with a silversmith. Without mentioning anything beyond a general interest in the process, she sat and watched him work. She watched as he held the silver over the fire, explaining that in order to burn away every impurity, he had to keep it in the middle where it was hottest. She asked him if he usually sat in front of the fire the entire time. Yes, he replied, not only do I have to hold it, I must watch it. If I leave it there even a moment too long, it will be destroyed instead of refined. After thinking about that for a while, she asked, then how do you know when the process is complete? Smiling, the silversmith replied, that's easy. I see my face reflected in it. The verse from Malachi says,
Like a refiner of silver, he will sit and closely watch as the dross is burned away, refining them so that they will do their work for God with pure hearts.
If you're in the fire today, remember, A, God's holding you. B, He won't let you be destroyed by the fire or circumstances, or take His eyes off you for a moment. C, when He's finished, you'll reflect His likeness. Can you think of a greater honour? Remember, God has your best interests at heart, even though sometimes His ways are totally incomprehensible to our finite minds. But He knows what is best, and He knows the end from the beginning. So at these times, let's not try to understand, but rather trust the one who does understand.
I think one of the hardest things is people feeling sorry for us. I had a dreadful experience once, a long time ago, mind you, but I was in a shop and this lady came in and started to weep, and then she went up to my friend and whispered, but of course I could hear every word she was saying, and she said, I feel so sorry for her being blind. I'm going to give you money. Please buy her chocolate.
Well,
I was absolutely shocked. Well, I came out of the shop and my friend, who was a policewoman at the time, she says, well, we're not going to buy you chocolate. We're going to put the money in the housekeeping. But of course, that was a very misguided thing to do. The lady obviously felt sorry, but
I think some people just can't cope with the idea of visible disability. I'm sure that wheelchair users must find this sort of thing happening to them as well.
yes, that's a very, very important point. Well, Jan Turner has got something interesting to say about this.
Another thing that I've come across is that sighted people sometimes, when they first come into contact with blind people, they feel sorry for blind people because they're blind. And I think the problem is that they're thinking how they would react if they were blind, rather than taking into account that I've been blind all my life and therefore I'm used to being blind. I mean, there is a difference certainly with people who have been blind all their lives and those who have become blind, because there's a period when people have to adjust to becoming blind, and that is a very difficult period. But generally speaking, it's more helpful to blind people if you just ask them what they need, rather than feeling sorry for them.
Of course, the flip side of that coin is that blind people are seen as being really heroic. You know, I mean, I've often had it said to me, and I'm sure you have, "Oh, I think you're very brave, dear."
Yes, that's right. And I think on television you either see people that can hardly do anything when they're blind, or they're doing like skiing at a very high speed
Oh, yes, I hate that.
at the Alps or something like that. And of course, people think then that blind people can do absolutely anything.
Yes, that's right. And I believe Jan has something to say about that.
There's a myth around that all blind people are marvellous, and that's something that really gets to me, because we're all very different, in fact, and we're all individuals. And obviously blind people, like sighted people, have got different skills and different talents, but they're not particularly any more marvellous than other people are. And another thing, when people talk to my assistant, they often say that they're marvellous because they work with me. Well, they might be marvellous to put up with me, but actually not because I'm blind, just because I'm me. But people think that you're special if you work with disabled people or blind people.
Yes, I think that's true. I have had it said to people that are with me as well. In fact, one very funny time, the Torch Trust Choir was out, and we were at St Ives, I think it was in Devon, and Carol Noakes was organising it, and she was getting everyone to come into the bus and the cars to go on to another venue for the choir to sing. And somebody came up and said, "A labour of love, my dear, a labour of love."
To Carol?
Yeah, to Carol. Certainly not to us. We were the labour, I think.
Yes, definitely.
Here's the last one that I'll give you, which I think is probably the best one, and I'm sure we both agree with it wholeheartedly. All blind people are super saints.
Oh, how did you guess, Sheila? Yeah, I mean, I knew that I was a super saint.
Absolutely.
Well, those are some of the myths. I wonder if there's any way we can actually dispel those myths. Let's hear what Jan has to say about it.
I think I'd like people to treat me as a person, but to take into account that I am a blind person and that I might need just a hand to go round somewhere or avoid something or be told about a flight of steps, or just to remember that you're blind, but not to treat you more carefully than other people, but just to get to know me and treat me as a friend or colleague or whatever relationship we were having, and not to feel worried, but if you were unsure, to ask the question that you're unsure about, because the chances are that people have reacted to me like that in the past, and it won't be the first time that the worry will be there.
I think one of the most important things is to help people relax. I heard a lady said to me once when I was doing a concert in her area that she was very relieved that I was a normal blind person, because once she'd asked someone if they wanted help across a road and they'd become so angry they hit her with the white stick, and it really frightened her.
I bet it did.
And we need to help people understand that, you know, blind people are really very approachable and really very grateful for help.
Yes, I think that's generally true. We've had experiences, my husband and I, of people saying that they've had a difficult response from someone and they were nervous to ask us. I think the main thing is that people should ask, if they can actually work up the courage to ask. I mean, you do hear of people being whipped across roads that they never even wanted to cross.
Yes.
And that can be difficult because, of course, you have the problem of getting back over the traffic onto the side you should be on. And they've usually gone by then. So I once took a little talk to brownies, and I thought, well, they're only 8 or 9. What can I impress on them? So I said, there's just 3 little words. Always ask first. And I hope they remember those.
That's right. Ask, and if the person says, no, I can manage, they're not being dismissive of you. They're just saying that they're okay.
Yeah. And of course, the other thing is that one could run into a blind or disabled person who's, not really coping with their disability themselves, and that could provoke an unwelcome response. So I think as Christians, we have to recognise that and, care for them and understand that happens sometimes.
Well, I'm sorry to say that's all we have time for this week. Remember, if you'd like to learn more about any of Torch's offerings for blind and partially sighted people, including our free Pathway audio Bible players, they're wonderful and they're free, remember, then do get in touch. The number to call is 01858 438 260. That's also the number where you can leave us comments, song requests or suggestions. If you have an interesting story to share, let us know. So that's 01858 438 260, or you can email info@torchtrust.org. So until next time, from me, Marilyn, and everyone on the Reflections team, goodbye and God bless.
You've been listening to Reflections from Torch Trust.